Randy, good to have you on here, man. I know we touched base a couple weeks ago when we talked about this, and something I offered to you, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit more. But it's you're kind of making we got some good news yesterday about making a step up in your organization that you're with the Pirates. But just to kind of go back and give a little background on how you and I know each other. So we met, I guess it was 2019. We met with the Rockies, and you were, and we'll get into this too. You were at the time the DR S&C coordinator for the Rockies, controlling all the stuff S&C wise that happened in the DR. And like I said, we'll get into some of those details. But now you're with the Pirates and kind of working your way through. So we met back then and have stayed in touch quite a bit. And now it's kind of something where we're definitely like reconnecting. And I think you have a great story, and you've had a not a struggle in a negative way, but a struggle in a positive way of kind of working your way through this profession. And this profession is a very challenging profession. So I have a lot of respect for it. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And I know everybody's gonna be able to take a lot of good info from this. So appreciate you being on here.
Thank you so much, Colbert. It's a pleasure to me. It's an honor to be part of this interview to this podcast. I feel really glad because it's gonna be my first podcast and couldn't be better to start in your hands since you know me from a little while already. And let me correct you a little bit. I wasn't the coordinator down there in the DR. At least I
Sorry.
didn't have the title, but I
Sorry.
was the only strength, rehab, and conditioning strength coach down there. So it was a very like enhanceful experience for me, and it was one of the reason why I'm here right now in this position. But also I want to take advantage to for the people that are around that doesn't know me. I'm Dominican. English is my second language, and I'm still working on that. So my apologies if you guys see some kind of mispronunciation with the structure, but I'm gonna try to do my best today.
Yeah, no, you're gonna be fine with that. And you're right. I did misspeak, but I did mistitle you, but I didn't. I did that kind of on purpose because you were basically the coordinator down there. Like unlike many
Yes, sir.
organizations, the Rockies didn't have a lot of organizations have DR coordinators and strength coaches that work underneath of them. With the Rockies, we had a minor league coordinator, and then you were the only person that really handled business down in the DR. Now Trevor would go down there on occasion. I know Jaspy and those guys would go down there on occasion. Gabe would go down there, but you were basically the guy down there, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Before we get to that, though, I want to kind of go back a little bit more to just your previous background before you were even an S&C coach, because I think I know a little bit about it. I know you played baseball, obviously, and I think you play a little bit of pro ball as well.
No, sir. I was just amateur baseball player in Dominican Republic. I used to have what we call down here verbal agreement with one professional team, but I couldn't make it because of multiple reasons. I started with my mentality. When I was young, it was very hard for me to handle tryouts and things like that. And once I got a verbal agreement, I got injured and I didn't have the resources to get back on time for the July 2nd signing period, but it was a good experience that provided me with a lot of experience for nowadays being a strength and conditioning coach in pro baseball.
So you were a pitcher.
Yes, I used to be a
What
pitcher.
what was your injury?
It was something in my scab. It never was determined, or I never
Didn't
had
have
like
like the
some
resources,
medical
right?
exactly medical information about it. But it was something that prevented me to sign on time. So after that, as in the art, the signing period is very hard, very tough because there is a lot of pressure in young kids that they need to meet certain requirements of, for example, throwing 90 miles per hour before 16-year old and those type of things. Once you cannot make those type of things, especially back in 2019 when I used to be July 2nd player, you have no more chance. The only chance that you have is like quit from the game and start studying because you are not part anymore from of the competition.
Yeah, I want to get into that a little bit because I think that's something that, as someone who's grown up in America and played sports as an American youth adolescent, I think that's something that we sometimes lose track of how we think things are competitive in America versus how like somewhere like the DR, how even more competitive and cutthroat it is, for better or worse. It's just I think it's something that people don't really necessarily realize. Um, so let's actually start with that because I was going to ask you kind of what made you then go into wanting to be a strength and conditioning coach and how you kind of found out about the profession. But let's start with that. Let's start with like what is it? Take us kind of just through what it's like growing up in the DR. especially as a young male aspiring baseball player? Like, what does that look like? What is that time commitment? How competitive is it? How cutthroat is it? How, I mean, are you able to trust anybody? Are you kind of looking out for yourself? Like, how does all that work?
Well, right now in the DR, things have getting better because there are a lot of good people, good coaches that are receiving the right information because everybody here is not everybody, but a very good amount of people here is trying to learn English, and all the good information are in that language, you know. But back in 2006, when I first started in my baseball journey, it was tough to find like a good coach. You know, I remember that I used to do just two things in baseball: throwing and running. That was everything. And through those two things, I was able to increase my arm strength up to throw 86, 87 miles per hour with 14, almost 15-year old. It was a very like aggressive process where I was practically alone. My father didn't know about anything in regards to baseball. My mother neither. So I was just trusting in my coach. And by those times, he didn't know anything as well. So we were doing the same exactly thing every single day. I didn't know how to like overcome plateau or stagnation in those days because I wasn't even training in a weight room. My first visit in to a gym, it was after my injury, you know. So I lost a lot of years to develop that nervous system capacity of being like a different player because I was increasing doing the same exactly thing. So it was tough at the very beginning. But then after the injury, it was when my curiosity for strength and conditioning started. Even though I didn't know how to read things in English, I remember that I used to go into YouTube when YouTube first started and watch videos of Eric Cressy in those times. And I was trying to do like the things that he was doing there without even knowing the purpose, just because I wanted to get better. I wanted to heal my injury and I wanted to come back to baseball. So it was very fun because those things that I was learning there as a baseball player then were helping me to make the transition to coach. So I spent trying to get back to baseball like 2 years. And in those 2 years, I also got born this hand. So it was another process of rehab. And I met very good people throughout this process, therapists, because I wasn't able to move my fingers for a little while, and I was asking a lot of questions in those days. And also those people were then helping me with the shoulder. And it was a very long process, but I think it was part of my journey, it was part of my life because that was the starting point of becoming a strength and conditioning coach because my curiosity started from there. I think it was if I wasn't got injured, maybe I would never be strength coach nowadays.
Yeah, and honestly, that's a lot of strength coaches and athletic trainers and physical therapists. That's kind of how a lot of their journeys start is from their own injuries. And honestly, I would even say that for me to an extent of, always being like an undersized athlete. Like I realized when I got to the gym, like that was one of the only ways that I was ever gonna like have a chance to be competitive is to just try to get in the weight room and kind of outwork people. I do want to kind of follow up though. So because I don't know if I asked this right. Like, it- how would you how would you describe just in general the the experience of a like a Dominican, like whether it's right now or whether it's when you were coming up through, like how would you describe like what it's like to be a Dominican, trying to be a Dominican professional baseball player, and like just how competitive it is and how, like, I mean, you guys are basically like you said, you're throwing and you're running, and those are like the only two things that you do, like that you're worried about. But I mean, I know it's one of those things where like, and again, I don't know how to say this, like I don't want to be demeaning or condescending, but it's like
Yeah.
there's guys that are struggling even just to find food, clean water, shelter,
Yeah.
find a baseball that actually has laces still on it. Like, I mean, it's pretty much cut through it because that is to an extent that's some of the guys where you're from, like that's your only way to ever make a life for yourself. I mean, am I
Yes,
wrong
sir.
to say that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, and that's the way that we need to get to the process here. For example, when I used to play, because I was like a prospect, you know, I was throwing about 85 miles per hour without turning 15-year old yet. So I was in a house of two-bedroom, where also along with me were 15 more players, bro. 15 more players just two or three of those players were having breakfast because they were prospect, and the other 12, 11 players were just having lunch and dinner. And it was very cool, very difficult situation because at the very beginning I was having the three meals, and that was like a very poor quality meals. But we were like very engaged with the process, very committed because we were dreaming with be pro and change the life, that type of life, you know. And then when I got injured, it was even harder because my coach wasn't putting attention to me. I was anymore getting the three food a day. I was getting just two. Um, it was very frustrating because now I was alone. You know, I know that I was alone. I needed to become myself, my own coach at a very young age. In those terms, nobody was helping me with mechanic. Nobody was helping me get back from my injury. And once I get back, like in around 18-year old, I was in the field just there to help develop other players. I was getting ready for every Saturday throw live VP, so the hitters of 14, 15-year old that were prospect, they were taking advantage of myself because I was throwing for their development, you know. And at some point, I tried to also make the jump to get a scholarship in the United States because my mom lived in the United States since I was a kid. So I was also without my mom here in this country. And when I tried to make that jump with like a tourist visa, I traveled to New York where my mom used to live, and over there I made a few tryouts for a few schools. I remember that few school wanted to give me the opportunity, but by those time, it what American school called like the ESL program, something to teach players or to teach players how to speak English, no type of thing. By those days, didn't exist, so I needed to make it through like speaking and also performing in baseball. And I was only good at this because I was throwing like 88, 89 when I was 18, 19, but I wasn't able to speak English. So I needed to pass a test that I wasn't able even to understand in those days. So that's when I first retired from baseball, and I was giving up on my dream. But I knew that in my country there were 30 academies, 30 professional academy, which is the only professional sport that we have down here, baseball. And I wasn't very angry to, I mean, very eager to find a way to get into pro baseball. So I was studying the system. I was visiting academies while I was working as a personal training for an amateur academy down here in the DR. I was one of those coaches that were providing information or good information in those days because I had experience from multiple places. And through that, I met one person who provided me with the right information about the CSCS, about the importance of studying English to get into pro baseball. And that's how 25-year-old later, I made the jump to pro baseball. But it was a really long process because I spent like 2 years working in commercial gyms, then 2 more years working in amateur leagues, and then I received the first opportunity with my previous organization.
So
It was tough, bro. It was like a very long process. But
yeah, and
I'm
then
glad I wouldn't change anything because nowadays still the same here in Dominican Republic. The only difference is that players have a little bit more resources since those coaches that started back in the days, now they are like some of them are multimillionaires because of the players that they have signed. So they now have more resources.
yeah, when it's one of those where, you know, as somebody who has a kid now and had grown up in America and has a kid now living in America, like I would never want my daughter to have to feel like sports is her only way to succeed in life. But I think there is something to be said about the fact that it does make you really lock in and strive for something, and you're not distracted. I'm sure, you know, the guys that you were coming up with, you guys weren't distracted with, you know, video games and you know, TV shows and things like that. That it's so easy to become kind of just spoiled and coddled in America and be kind of distracted by those things. And even similar to like just your coaching journey, like you had to learn a language just to be able to become a strength coach. Like we all in America, we can become strength coaches because we already speak the language. All the textbooks are already in our language. All the tests are already in our language. The universities are set up. It's something where like there's just an extra step. Like you had to go through extra hoops just to get to the starting point that most people start at. So I think that's something that is really cool and something that I really respect. So you mentioned, working at a commercial gym, working at in the amateur level, and then you mentioned getting with, I assume that was the Rockies you were talking about, was like the first
Yes, sir.
position. So how did that go about? You met, who did you meet from the Rockies, and how did that go about you getting that as your first opportunity to be a strength coach for the Rockies?
Yeah, let me, before answering your question, I want to also mention that it wasn't only the fact of going through that process, but as well as I was not too close to school. I wasn't practically studying. I was going to school just once a week. So I was missing a lot of development in terms of education, So that's why nowadays it's still a struggle for me, the fact of speaking, because not everybody down here in the R is struggling with English. There are a lot of people that can speak way higher, better than me, because they were studying while I was trying to get time as a pro baseball player. And that person is called Max Torres, who was the strength and conditioning coach for the DSL of the Colorado Rockies by those days. I
I
remember
know,
that.
yeah, I know that name. I don't know if I ever met him, but I remember that name. Yes.
I remember that I went to the Colorado Rockies Academy to do like a warm up with a player that was going to do tryout over there. And I saw Max. And fortunately, by those times, now Max already speaks Spanish. He's an American, but he already know how to speak Spanish by those days. So I approached him because he was a strength coach and he was doing practically the same thing that I wanted to do. And I asked him, "Hey, Max, what did you study? How did you get this job? What can I do?" I first introduced myself, obviously, but then I started shooting questions. And he answered those questions. He told me, continue working on your English, continue working on learning this type of information, and then shoot me a message at some point. That was in 2017. So in 2018, when I feel that I was more ready because I enrolled myself in a call center to improve my speaking skill, because that was the main thing that he told me. And I failed, like honestly, in the call center, the first try, I failed. But I was smart enough to I remember to memorize the question, so I tried it 1 week after, and then I passed. But the thing is that in the call center, I developed multitasking skill of listening while I was writing, moving the mouse, and answering to the clients. But I remember that it was tough at the very beginning. And at some point, I reached a plateau because it was the same kind of conversation every single day with the clients. But that helped me to send that first email to Max Torre with my resume, with my experience, with the passion that I have for baseball, for everything. So he decided to interview me. After the first interview, he invited me to the complex. I met all the professional coaches, the director of the academy as well. That during that interview, and in the third interview, I remember that they offered me a contract of 3 months to working in pro baseball for the first time. So that was my best chance. I remember that I was very excited for the opportunity. I didn't even think about money. I didn't even ask about it. They told me after I signed the contract, I just wanted to get into pro because I knew that I was going to grow, I was going to learn, I was going to become the strength coach that I wanted to become, and that I was going to find the right information in the organization alongside with Trevor Suarez, my Jasperson, and Gabe Bauer, who were part of this process as well.
Yeah, and honestly, like Trevor, I kind of have a lot of my jump in my professional career goes to Trevor and Jaspy and Gabe, because of just, again, similar in terms of just them giving me the opportunity to be that first full season strength coach in minor league baseball. So shout out to those three guys, and a lot of respect for them. Do you, this is kind of just a side note, because like I said, I never met Max, but I know the name. Where's he at now? Do you know, do you still stay in touch with him? Where's he coaching at?
Yeah, we are connected. We don't talk much throughout the year, but we exchange some emails, at least 2, 3 emails every single year. Right now, he's working in Texas for a commercial gym. I don't know. I'm not sure what is his like title there, but I know that he's leading over there, and he's
Okay.
he's doing good. Also, he got married as well.
Nice, nice, nice. Um, So you get the job for the Rockies, and you're in the DR working, and just kind of again, because a lot of people don't. Honestly, I don't know if I knew this up until I got into pro baseball at all. Like if I had any knowledge of just how not different, but just how unique the DR training is, especially the way it was for the Rockies, where it was you and you had what 80 to 100 guys, something like that. So talk us through kind of your responsibilities when you were down there, and I guess just start with that because I'm going to end up asking probably 2 or 3 follow-up questions. Just kind of talk us through those first 3 months, and then over the next couple of years of leading the charge down there in the DR.
Yeah, bro. Like it's a great question, and now I feel more confidence because I feel that my English already warm up. So let's go. I remember that during my first opportunity with Max told me, hey, forget whatever information that you think that you know. All the things that you have learned in the past few years as a personal trainer, forget about those things. Just do shadowing the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And once you feel more comfortable to say something to a player, let me know. And we can work on that. But a part of that, every single afternoon, we were practicing our movement in the afternoon. So I'm very grateful that he was taking his time to teach me, So he was very committed to prepare me, to develop me. Every single afternoon, we were working on conditioning, on lifting, on mobility, everything for the first 3, 4 weeks. After the first month, I started coaching. He assigned me a few players. I was really excited of the experience. I was running and leading warm up, mobility sessions, lifting and conditioning session, also testing as well. It was a very good experience because it was providing me with a lot of confidence. Then at some point, before the season finished, he allowed me to lead this actively the staff meetings. So I was participating in the staff meeting, which was a very good experience because that was the main one of the main thing in the strength and conditioning, communicating. And I was really behind on that. I'm still working on that, but that guy was giving me the confidence and the trust back in 2018 to make it in a table of professional coaches. So it was a very good experience. But unfortunately, after those 3 months, along with him, he decided to quit from the Colorado Rockies. Trevor Swat called me and offered me a 1 month contract for the Instruct of 2018. And I was already along with 80 players in that instructional league with just 3 months of experience. So for those who might know, my first degree as a professional is business administration. So I'm very good at organization, control, and planning the resources that I have in my hands just because my first degree. And that helped me to continue doing what Max was doing alone. So I continue working the same way. I was having a lot of calls with Trevor. I don't even know how Trevor was understanding me, but he was like so smart that he was understanding my English by those times, and he was guiding me very well. So it was a successful camp, and I gained a lot of experience and confidence by the end of that camp. And I remember that even though everything, all those things were happening, I still was in the call center because it was, like a no full time contract, part time contract. So I couldn't quit my first job because I didn't know what was going to happen. So it was a very tough moment at the same time because I was not sleeping at all. I just was sleeping 3 4 hours a day in order to reach my dream and achieve my goals. But I remember that in December of 2018, Trevor called me and told me, "Hey, Randy, we want to offer you a full time contract. You're gonna be our strength coach in 2019 for the full year, for the whole year." And I accepted. And from that point on, we already have 7 years working in pro baseball.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know if I realized that my first year with the Rockies then was like your first full official year as well. I thought you had been there. And honestly, maybe that was just because of like you had already had some experience. And when I got there, I was learning from you, because of just the fact of the way the Rockies ran their system and things. And the one thing that you haven't mentioned, which I don't know how much you guys did year round down there, is, the Rockies were big on force plates and using the Sparta software. So you're also learning like a whole nother language of just the sports science stuff. That's something else that, like, you know, probably got lost in the shuffle there of like, hey, you're learning how to be a strength coach. You got kind of the professional aspect done because you have, like you said, your business degree and your knowledge of kind of running things and being organized, but you're learning how to be a strength coach on the fly. You're still learning English on the fly. And now you throw in some of the sports science stuff, which we'll come back to that in a minute. But it's something that you just, again, it's one of those where, and I hope all of my interns and GAs and former coaches listen to this because, again, I think sometimes we in America we take some of this stuff for granted. Like we think like you know getting paid something is not fair, and it's like, hey, like getting paid anything sometimes is like more than what most people start out their career making, right?
Yeah.
You were literally running things for a month down there and you weren't full time. Like you were still working a part-time job. You're basically getting full-time experience, but internship salary, and you had to go work another job just to be able to make money, and continue to work on your English speaking skills. So it's one of those where, like, again, this is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on here because just your story and your journey is so unique and so important that people hear that it's not just you know you get your college degree and then you're guaranteed some job or you're making six figures. Like that's not how I would necessarily want this profession to be. Like, I wish it was like that a little bit better for everybody, but I also realize that, like, if you really want to make this your profession and you really want to do it, it might take 7 years, like it has for you, to where you're finally like, and not that your job's uh, in the rookie ball seasons and those seasons weren't important, but now, as we were talking about before the call started, like this is your first year working like you're going to be in charge of the AAA team, which again we'll talk about more. But it's taken you 7 years to get to where you've built the skills and the abilities to have like what would most people would consider like almost like a top of the minor league job now, right? You're kind of working with the highest level minor league baseball players in the Pirates organization. So again, just a lot of respect. So with that being said, though, what were the take us through what it's like to be a now that you've obviously worked in the U.S. Minor leagues, but take us what it's like to be a minor league strength coach slash minor league, like from kind of the player's perspective in the DR versus being in America. And then how much of the sports science stuff were you guys using with the Rockies back then in the minor leagues?
Yeah, like it's a very good question. I remember that in 2019 we were 2000 my whole experience with the Rockies, we were using just the first play. We were just jumping our players, and through that we were accessing their like weaknesses and physical quality in terms of power, strength, and rate of force development. And I remember that Trevor was guiding me a lot because I had a lot of questions at the same time. I wasn't practicing my speaking skill a lot at all. I was just trying to learn how to write and how to listen and comprehend because Trevor was in the United States, I was in the DR, and I didn't have enough time to like have conversation because as I told you, I was the only strength, rehab, and conditioning coach for two teams, 80 players. And it was very difficult because I still was building my foundation in terms of traditional strength training. But at the same time, I was trying to learn sport scientists, which is another area, and it was a ton of information. At the same time, I was learning the language, and as you said, I wasn't paying attention to the payment because my main goal was to develop myself, not get money, and because I knew that at some point the money was going to come once I become a finished product, and I'm still working on it, as you can see. And the main difference in between working in the DSL and the FCL is the communication. The communication should be more concise, more precise, more solid to influence ideas of trainers, sport coaches, physical therapists, everybody, because in that point, it's no more about development as a coach, it's no more about traditional strength training because it's supposed that you already have those skills. So we are an expert in those type of things. Now is the other side of strength and conditioning, the side where the critical thinking take place where it's no more about the theory, it's no more about credential, it's no more about just knowledge. It's more about coaching experience and abilities. And that's where coaches like my leaders, Cody Cook, Nick Presley, developed myself in the last 2 years. because they knew that in those 4 years in the Colorado Rockies, I developed a bunch of skill, but the soft skill, such as the one I mentioned already, were the thing that I was missing to make this step that I'm making nowadays. I'm still working on that, but it was a very excited opportunity. It was something that at the same time was feeling sad because I didn't want to leave from the Rockies. I was treated very well from with those coaches over there. I met you. I met very good, great minds in the Colorado Rockies, but by those time, the organization didn't have the space to promote me and to expose me to a different level, and I was eager to have that opportunity. So that's when I resigned in 2022. Then I got the opportunity with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I remember that Cody Cook and his team told me, "Hey, I know that you want to work in the state, but we don't know you. There are things that you need to continue working on, and we would like you to help us in the DR for at least a year, and then we can have another conversation." So, and I accept the deal, not just because of those things, was because what I saw in the academy that they were doing. They had a weight room down here in Dominican Republic that didn't need to envy anything of American weight rooms. We got everything. When I jumped to the complex for the first interview, I saw the Norboard, I saw multiple force play, I saw dynamometers, tendon units, a lot of different technology that I never been exposed. That I was just seeing those things in videos through YouTube, through articles, and those things, all of that things were in the Pittsburgh Pirates organization down here in Dominican Republic. And I say, this is the organization. I don't care if I'm gonna travel to United States or no, because I need to learn this technology. I need to learn these science behind what these people is doing. So I took the challenge, but really quick after my first 9 months, I remember that I was finishing the Dominican Summer League season. And that week in the playoff, Cody could call me and told me, uh, hey, would you like to make the jump to the United States? Uh, and I accept the challenge. Cody called me along with Orlando Kranz, who is the Dominican coordinator, or no, he's not Dominican, he's Panamanian, but he have Dominican roots, and he's the coordinator down here in Dominican Republic, and he was the first guy who recruited me for the Pirates. They called me, they gave me the opportunity, I took the challenge. The very first year, 2024, that I jumped to the United States the lead strength coach for the team, it was very tough for me because that was the first exposure to speaking. I was already good comprehending, writing, in my structure because I'm not a good writer, a perfect writer. I'm still developing those skills, but I'm able to pass the message across and write clearly. But listening is my biggest skill because I can comprehend everything and I don't have any issue with that. But 2024 was the main point. I show up to spring training in February and I didn't know how to say good morning. And in my mind, everything was clear. I knew what I wanted to say, I knew what I wanted to express, but my tongue, the muscle of my mouth, my neuroplasticity, anything was there to make the jump. It was very tough for me. And I remember that I say, okay, I need to calm down. I need to start working on this. But I'm glad that Cody Cook, Nick Presley, and all the strength coaches department, they gave me the confidence as you are doing now to do it on my way. And, that level is filled of 85, 90% of Dominican or Latin players. And it was kind of easy at the beginning because I was doing all the stuff that I used to do. The only difference was the technology and the conversation. But then a new experience was in the corner, the draft player in 2024. So I remember that one of my best player, which is the number one prospect of the world right now, Connor Griffin, was signed in that year. And it was, bro, like it was a pressure for me, but at the end, I learned how to deal with those players. I gained the confidence to work with them, and they were trusting in me, regardless of the communication constraint and barriers. So it was good to also feel the respect from the players because I told that speaking in the best way it was the key to connect with players, and it wasn't. Like making relationship with them, it was easier than I thought. They were understanding the way I speak and the way I coach. And this year was easier because, as you can see, I was able to hold longer conversation and express myself better, and that helped me nowadays to gain the confidence to be in the way in the point that I am. But it was a very tough process for me personally. I wouldn't change anything. I'm just glad of have been found an organization as the Pittsburgh Pirates that took the risk of hiring me and promote me without uh, without thinking about my limitations. They just were seeing my potential, my passion for the strength and conditioning and for the game of baseball as well. And they like put their money on me, and I'm not gonna let them down.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think first of all, shout out to Corey. We interviewed, I met him at Summer Strong, as I mentioned, and just talking to him for like 5 minutes at Summer Strong conference, like I could tell that he was like one of the better thinkers, especially in the baseball world. So a lot of respect for him. And it's kind of a weird thing where then I found out that you were working for the Pirates, and I was like, oh shit, like that's what's such a small world. But yeah, Corey, I think was episode like 28, something like that. So it's cool that we've kind of met, we've kind of both kind of matriculated to knowing Corey Cook through different routes, but like we both feel like that kind of the same about his knowledge base and the way that the Pirates do things. And honestly, that's something that just the more I've learned about what the Pirates do from you and from him, and even talking to some of the other people that I know in the organization, like they've always kind of been at the forefront of doing things the right way and introducing sports science the right way. So it's very exciting for you. And honestly, I'm excited to hear from you about how things are going. And we'll talk a little bit about some of that training philosophy and sports science stuff here in a second. And we talked to Corey a little bit about it already. So I don't want to ask a lot of the same questions, but we'll definitely kind of ask some of those questions. I was gonna ask you this. This is something that I've kind of always thought, and then hearing you say it made me think of it. So working in like the at that rookie ball level in the U.S. The summer ball leagues, and you have 85-ish% of your players are Latin American, then that other 15 to 20% are American draft players. Do you feel like it's in your best interest and or the athlete's best interest at times, like the Latin American players? Do you feel like it's hard sometimes to not still want to talk to them in Spanish? But at some point, does that also hinder both your development and their development? Because they also are expected to learn English as well to an extent. Do you feel like that's something that you found it hard sometimes? Like if a guy's doing something wrong, you're immediately thinking of coaching him in Spanish, and you have to like catch yourself and coach him in English, or is that something that it is what it is? I'm just going to coach you as quickly as possible, whether it affects both of your long-term development. I don't know if that's a fair question, but it's just something I've thought about. Like, is it like I know whenever I was working with Latin American players, I purposely would, even if they understood English, I purposely would try to speak to them in Spanish because I knew I wanted to get better at Spanish. So like even though I knew I could say it to them in English and they would understand me, I would purposely try to talk to them in Spanish. And honestly, I still like trying to do stuff like that because I think it's a very good thing they'll know. How do you kind of navigate that in terms of like, do you still try to speak to them in English to work on both of your guys' English skills, or do you just coach them as quickly as possible? And if it has to be Spanish, it's in Spanish.
What I do, for example, as having 2 years already working in the United States in the Florida Complex League, what I do is allow them the first year to acclimate to the system, to acclimate to the state. They have too much things to learn. I'm putting myself in their shoes when I first got here in 2024, and I know that they have less education than me when they are coming from the DR or Venezuela or Panama or Mexico, whatever country they come from. And at the very beginning, some of them approached me, hey, Randy, coach me in English because I would like to learn. So I start having a small conversation with them. They sometimes when they don't understand, they just tell me, hey, Randy, translate it in Spanish because that part is too hard. And same is happening with American. There are a few of the players from the draft that they like Spanish and they are trying to learn Spanish just to connect with the Latin players. And they want me to coach them in Spanish as well. So it's kind of fun as well because I'm having those type of interaction with both Americans and Latin, and it's helping me as well because it's not easy. I think it's more difficult to learn English in that environment or learn Spanish in that environment than in Dominican Republic, because in Dominican Republic you know that there is just one language and you can dedicate your own time to the other one. But doing the switch at every single minute, at every single point of the day is hard because you need to switch structure, you need to switch thoughts, and sometimes at the end of the day you feel like drained. But in terms of players, the experience have been really good and easy to handle in those terms. They like the diversity that we have.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's something I definitely can relate to. Of like sometimes it's just like sometimes you just get worn out trying to just bounce back and forth, and it's just
Yeah.
you must need to just kind of pick your battles with that at times. So let's get a little bit into the definitely the training stuff. So in terms of, and obviously I know the Rockies and I know you were at the Rockies, so we don't need to get into too much of that, like in terms of the difference between the Rockies and the Pirates, but just in terms of your personal kind of standards and thought process. So the things over the last 7 to 8 years that you've been in this profession, the things that you kind of feel like are your main pillars, like, hey, we have to do this, we have to do that. Like, and not that you ever have to do anything, but let's say, we want to call a squat, like we have to do some sort of squat. It can be a lunge, it can be a leg press, it can be a regular back squat, it can be a front squat, whatever. Like, what are some things that you feel like you personally, as a strength coach, feel like athletes need to get done and they need to do to better themselves? Um, and then we'll tie that into kind of like how that fits with like the Pirates organization. And again, it might be something where you used to think athletes had to do this when you were with the Rockies, but now that you're at the Pirates, you're like, all right, well, maybe we didn't have to do that. So what are kind of your pillars and your philosophies as a strength coach? And then I'll kind of have a follow up kind of related to the Pirates.
Well, it's a great question, and really, it's a question that it takes years to develop because at the very beginning, when you start, even though if you are American and you have all the resources, the information, the school to study this, you don't even know what is your philosophy because the fact of you need to collect information, you need to collect experience, and then you can decide what is the best way for you. And for example, in my case, that I just have had 7 years working in the same exact level, let's say, because the rookie and the DSL, the only difference I told you, communication and the language, right? So I center my pillars in three things. First, movement quality, because I'm working with young players, and then individualized programming, which is something very important in the Pirates organization as well, and then workload management. I would say because we are dealing with players that they don't know what to do and they like to get fatigue instead of working properly. So when I refer to movement quality, it's more about before moving to like increasing speed or loads or complexity of the movement, they need to first be ready in terms of mechanical efficiency, tissue capacity, joint range of motion, and those type of things. So then can we progress? And in terms of the individualized programming, after the experience that I have gained in the organization of the Pirates, everything that I'm doing in terms of programming is based on objective data. All the objective data that we are collecting and the Pirates are collecting for multiple years. I compare my players with the top performers that we have. So I make the programs toward increasing what they need from an internal to external environment with those players. And when it comes to the workload management, I like to integrate my traditional strength training knowledge, along with what I learn from the DR experience before getting into pro, as well as the sport demand of baseball with the wet side barbell methods, dynamic, repeated effort method, max effort method, just to build up power and resilience and robust player that we want to have without excessive stress or fatigue.
Yeah, so I think that's awesome. I think that's a really good just kind of three pillars that kind of make you stick to things. And it's not about exercises as much as it's about like chasing those philosophies and kind of everything having tied to those pillars. That ends up being more important than um sorry, you guys are good. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second.
Third time.
So yeah, it's one of those where like instead of getting caught up in like is a front squat or a back squat better, you're getting caught up in what can we do to individually help this athlete hit these certain metrics that we know other successful players have hit, or what can we do to make sure that this athlete we're not progressing them too fast, or we're not doing too much with them too quickly. So I think that's a great way to look at it because again, I think that's something that, and I try to keep programming as simple as possible because I think it's something that we can all get very overwhelmed with of like, oh, we should be doing front squats right now instead of back squats. When in reality, it's really like those are just tools. They're not like the full big picture. Um, kind of to lock in on each of those though to kind of unpack them a little bit more. So in specifically thinking about the movement quality, how often are you like, especially working, obviously going to AAA, that's going to be a whole different thing. But having been at that rookie ball level where you're getting guys that have been in the DR for a couple of years, have maybe been in America for a couple of years, Latin players, versus getting guys that have been coming from, you know, Power Four, like, LSU baseball players and, you know, Miami baseball players and guys like that. Um, how often are you like making a guy like start back from scratch? Like you get him there and they're like, oh, I've been in a college weight room for 4 years. I back squat 500 pounds. And you're like, yeah, but your movement quality sucks. And you have joint range of motion limitations. You have your ankles have no limitation. Your low back is weak. Like how often are you regressing athletes versus kind of typically kind of more progressing them, like coming in and being like, no, you can actually do this instead of this? Or how does that work in terms of just you're like coaching up your movement quality and finding a way to measure that movement quality to get the most out of them and keep them healthy and safe throughout the season?
Yeah, it's it's hard to explain, but it's something that happens very frequently because, as you mentioned, I just have been in two levels, but I have worked with players that are in the very first day of pro ball, with players that have signed in the draft with a lot of experience sometimes, and also major league baseball players in the off season. And it's matter to educate them. It's matter to educate them because sometimes they are doing things because that's what they have been taught, that they think that that's the best way. And when they approach or they get close to a coaches like us that can connect with them first before start coaching and can make that relationship where they start feeling in a comfort zone, then I approach them to fix those type of things and let them know, hey, you have been working in this for multiple years. It's time to a change because of multiple reasons. I try to keep things as simple as possible for them, and most of the time we need to change language, as you mentioned. Working with the lower level players, I don't need to like be soft in my conversation because they are going to do whatever things I said. But with higher level athletes, we must change the way we speak. For example, instead of saying, hey, you must do this thing in this way, we should say it might be better that we do the movement in this way because you're gonna be benefited in this type of uh things if you do it this way. Or let's gonna try next week. What you think if we schedule a specific session just to try the movement in this specific way because of it's more beneficial for you and you're gonna reduce the risk of injury. And at the end, in baseball, it's not just adding weight and adding weight and adding weight to the bar. At the end, baseball is more about rotational power, about building that strength standard that will help them continue performing on the field.
Yeah, and I think that 100% makes sense. I mean, it's one of those where there's a big difference between, and I've talked to some of my coaches about this before too. Some of my previous coaches of like, there's a big difference between coaching a guy that, especially like a high school draft guy or a Latin American signing guy, even versus a 4-year college guy versus like a 4-year minor league guy. And a lot of the times it's more of like, instead of coaching at them, you're like coaching with them. And like you said, it's like, hey, instead of doing this, have you ever thought about doing this? Or hey, have you ever tried this? Hey, what do you think about this? Like almost having it more of like an open-ended conversation, to really develop, like you said, develop that relationship versus, we get like a freshman athlete in here. It's like, no, you're gonna front squat because everybody needs to know how. Like, there's a big difference between that. If you told you go into your AAA season this spring and you tell every guy on the AAA team, hey, you're all going to front squat this spring. like I'm going to tell our football players this spring, like that's not going to go over very well. Because some of those guys would be like, no, I've never front squatted in my life. Why would I start now when I'm 25 years old and almost ready to make it into the big leagues? Like, so there's definitely like a big difference in terms of just like the way that you're going to have that conversation and that culture, and that exchange. So then the second thing is the individualization, which again is I think something that is extremely, extremely important, but also, especially for us at this level, very challenging. And going back to what you were saying, like when you were in the DR with 80 players, like it's almost impossible to have 80 separate individualized training programs. Um, what are some of in your time with the Pirates, and obviously with the Rockies, we did it a little differently with Sparta in terms of individualizing things, but in terms of your time with the Pirates, what have been some of the key metrics that you guys are taking from your sports science data that allows you to individualize things? So like obviously if you're looking at, eccentric rate of force development and you have a guy that's below average or below, he wants to be above average and he's well below, like you might change his training. Like give us some examples if you can of things that you're taking that sports science and some of that evaluation period to develop the individualized training.
Yeah. One example, we use a ton of technology. We have the isometric mean-time pool. We have the Northboard test. We have shoulder strength test. We have practically everything that can help us improve performance. But in terms of metric, I would say that one of the biggest one for me is the peak power of players. Peak power along with vertical velocity at takeoff are two metrics that, or peak force, yes, and vertical velocity at takeoff are two metrics that allow us to really compare where they are in terms of strength and power. So with those two metrics, when they already meet the prerequisite of movement quality and the prerequisite of joint range of motion, those type of things, I focus more and improve performance rather than just teaching them how to move and how to do things and how to create a routine. And those two metrics are really important because they help us to really connect or transfer what we are doing in the weight room to what they need to do on the field.
So if you have an athlete that, like, I don't know if there's a scenario where you can even just give us like an individualized athlete from last season where they come in, whether it's a signee or a guy that just got moved up from one of the Dominican leagues, like where their peak force is low. Is that just, hey, we got to get you under a barbell, we got to get you deadlifting and squatting, like that's where we start? And then versus this year where you're maybe going to have some AAA guys that strength is probably not their limiting factor, it may be something else. How would you have individualized for an athlete that has like low peak force or low takeoff velocity versus this year now where an athlete may need to just, they've already hit kind of those baseline thresholds, they need to just maximize other qualities? What would maybe be some differences in programming? I know you might not be able to speak to the AAA situation yet because you just got the job
Yeah.
yesterday, but what are some things that you're already thinking about, like how your programming may be different from a rookie ball guy versus like a AAA guy this spring?
You know that right now we are also developing what is called the dynamic strength index as well. And that gives us a really good information of what our athletes need, if they need more strength work and power work. So we are tailoring their programs based on those type of things. And it's really cool because in that level, I'm pretty sure that what we are doing in lower levels is paying off, and those players, as you have mentioned, won't have that limitation of strength that the rookie ball players have. So over there, it's going to be more of a maintenance of strength and more power and dynamic speed work program. So we are also going to integrate more like the traditional stuff, plyometrics, elbow throws, sprints, and fast movement in the weight room, such as P squat, bench press, banded deadlift, those type of things over there. And also because those type of movement, that can turn it on to go to the field. And at the same time, we are continue improving physical qualities.
Yeah. So, and again, that's something that I love to hear because I know I told you like whenever I was first in the pro baseball, there was still kind of some of that old school thing of like we're just going to get on leg press and do like two sets of 15 reps versus now like it seems like a little bit more of that college weight room is kind of matriculating over into that professional baseball world where you're going to be doing speed squats, speed deadlifts, box squats, like heavier, like you said, you mentioned earlier, like West Side Conjugate style type training. Whereas like 7 or 8 years ago, probably when you first got started, when I first got started in pro baseball, like you never ever saw somebody doing speed box squats. Like that just wasn't, you know what I mean? Like that wasn't a thing. So how much is that something that culturally, in terms of like the baseball culture, like is there still a lot of, you still have to sell that to the athletes, or is it something that most of the athletes are like pretty bought into? Like, because honestly, in my opinion, that stuff's way more fun than just doing a traditional, like I would, if I had to choose to squat ever again, it would always be with bands or chains on the bar. It would never just be straight barbell weight. So how much of that is like a cultural shift in terms of the mindset versus is it pretty accepted, especially obviously in the Pirates organization?
Well, I think it's otherwise because in the Pirates organization, that's a privilege, especially for those players that I'm working with in the lowest level, because as they need to meet the basic requirement of movement quality, of mechanics, and multiple other things, moving fast is a privilege. So all of them are eager to reach that level where they can start doing those type of movement because are more risky than the traditional strength training or the traditional tempo that we use, but they have fun because they have a sense of competition when they are moving those type of when they are doing those type of movement, especially having that objective information from our velocity based training devices. And it's really cool because once they reach that point, they already know that they are not training anymore for learning how to move. It's more now about performance and about getting ready for get promoted to another level.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It definitely makes people want to push themselves to get their strength to a certain level so they can get to do kind of more of what I'm going to call the fun stuff, which again, I agree it is more fun, but it's more fun for a reason because it's more transferable to the sport, to the you know, the power elements of the sport. Um, is there anything, and I don't know if I asked Corey this or not. I don't remember asking him this in this exact way, but are there anything, especially like I know, like again, like doing overhead presses and things like that was used to be kind of frowned on. Obviously, now you're seeing, especially with guys like Cressy influencing the field of realizing how important it is to be strong, like pressing overhead. Are there still any things that you feel like athletes are timid of, like whether it's overhead presses, whether it's like maybe some of the Olympic lifts? Is there still anything that you have seen or have worked with athletes that they're still afraid to do things? Even like speed work in season, like that's something that I know. I think it was all talking to you talking about like doing sled drags when you got a guy with a hamstring issue. Like, are there still some things that you feel like we haven't gotten the buy-in that we need to from the athletes yet to be able to start doing, or that we need to just continue to push the envelope of getting them to do any exercises or types of exercises or types of training that we need to be doing more of that just hasn't gotten to that level yet?
Well, here that's the good one of the good thing of this philosophy that we are not afraid to do any movement with our players as far as they need the prerequisites to do it because we don't classify any movement as a bad or any exercise as a bad. But if the player need it, we will do it because we don't have a limitation here when it comes to the big three, squat, deadlift, and bench press, and all their thousand variation. We are doing everything here. And for example, if a player here have some shoulder flexion limitation, it's a player that maybe we contraindicate some shoulder press movements or overhead movements. But if the player can meet the shoulder strength, I mean shoulder range of motion uh, limitations, if he meet those requirements, we are uh, we are not limited to do movement with them. The main thing is to make sure that their joints have what they need to have, or the joint do what they need to do, what they must do in order to do certain movement. But here, our library of movement is so extensive.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's awesome to hear. Because, like I said, there's definitely probably organizations out there that that's not the case, to where like nothing's off limits, and it's definitely wasn't traditionally the case like that. Um, what do you think? Just getting back to the AAA thing real quick before we move on to something else. Like, what do you think is something that you're kind of most excited for with the AAA level, and then also most like unsure, like apprehensive of being at that AAA level now and dealing with those, like that different area of their career, the different level of their career? What is the thing you're most excited for, and then the thing that you're kind of maybe most not scared of or not nervous about, but the thing that you're still not sure exactly how things are going to like play out. You're most kind of apprehensive about.
Yeah, I mean, For me, I trust in myself. In terms of strength and conditioning, I have no doubts that I'm gonna crush it, that I'm gonna make it over there. It's more about still the communication part. You know, the communication is a big weakness that I have, and I need to still working on that. But when it's come to working and connecting with players, I have no doubt that I'm gonna do a good job because even though it's gonna be my first time in a full time affiliate, let's say for 6 months, it's not gonna be anything different than what I have been doing the last few years because having 7 years already in pro ball have gave me the opportunity to work not just with AAA players, but also big league players. Nowadays, for example, there are a lot of players that were working with me down there in the DR that they are already big league players. They are with the Rockies. And here in Pirate City, in the rookie level with the Pirates, the fact of being in that specific spot gave me the exposure to deal with all type of players when they come down to do rehab, when they come down for off-season camps. So at the end, even though I know or I haven't been assigned to those higher level yet until now, I've been working with all of them. I think having that experience of working in that specific spot, the rookie level, the FCA or ACL, is the most enhanceful experience that any strength coach in baseball can have because you will be part of all the affiliates without being there specifically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense. And it was kind of that's kind of the answer I expected, but I just wanted to ask it because I wanted to see what your thoughts were about it. What do you, when you think of like the S&C professional, and you and I were profession, and you and I were talking about this on the phone call a couple weeks ago. How do you think we should like what are realistic expectations and outcomes? Like how do you think we as coaches should be our success should be measured? Kind of what does that conversation look like? What is your thought process there in terms and what do you guys talk about from a pirate standpoint of like, hey, if we did this, this, and this, like our job was done. Obviously it can't always be wins and losses. Um, Players get traded, so it can't always be just player. You know what I mean? Like what are some key things that we should be measured by, if that's even fair statement to say?
Well, I would say like in our philosophy or my personal philosophy, the main thing is keep the players healthy. You know that they can perform the whole season, that they can be available for the whole season. That's my main thing. After that, obviously, objective data. Make sure that they are increasing numbers, that our programming is well written, and they are working towards meeting the goals that we have for them in the season. And then I would say that after they get promoted to the next level, and I call the coach that is working in that level with them, or the coach call me and tell me, hey Randy, your players are doing well. They have a very good routine. They are moving with ownership, and they are doing what they need to do without me being around them. That's how I measure success and that I'm doing my work. As I said, availability, objective data, numbers, and that they can have and develop ownership of their career.
Yeah, and I think that's a good, some of those things are measurable, obviously, like any of the sports science and the metrics and the objective data, like that stuff is measurable. But in terms of like, does a player have good habits? Is a player competitive? Those things are something that we definitely have an influence on, and sometimes they're measurable and sometimes they're not. And it's one of those things, and that's kind of going to lead into my next question too. But it's one of those things where that's something that we definitely have an influence in. But some kids come in already having that, and some develop it by being around us, and some never develop it and still somehow find a way to be successful. Good, which is good and bad. Um, with that being said, what do you think are I'm trying to think of guys that we've worked together with. I know Ezekiel Tovar, Juan Mejia. Trying to think who else with the Rockies that we both know. What do you think makes some of those guys, especially coming from the same kind of background that you came from, of having to struggle in the DR and get signed as a 14, 15, 16-year-old and then work your way up through the Dominican leagues and then through the American minor leagues, and make it to the big leagues? Like, what do you feel like the guys that you've been around that have seen that make it from the DR all the way to the big leagues, or even from the high school American level to the big leagues, what are the most common characteristics that those guys have? Obviously, they have to all be skilled and talented to an extent, but how have they developed those skills? What mindset do they have? What consistencies, habits? What are the biggest things that you've seen um, across the board with those athletes?
Yeah, I would say that all of athletes, in order to make it to the big league, as you have mentioned, Juan Mejia, Ezequiel Tobar, GBG, Bernabel, all of them have what I call the credentials in baseball. The credentials in baseball would be good habit, working hard, consistency, all those traditional things that each professional and big elite athlete need to have. But in my opinion, what have differentiated them to others or what separate them to others that were not able to make it is the ability of adaptation, adaptability. If they are able to coming from Dominican Republic, my country, to the United States and adapt to the culture, to the system, then get promoted to another level and over there adapt to the coaches that they have over there and be coachable enough to listen, to understand, to perform better in that level. Adaptation will be key for not just for them, but every single athlete in pro baseball and in pro sport. They need to be able to develop that ability in order to continue moving forward through levels. Adaptability.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you see that in the college world too, coaching changes, position changes, playing time, like just being able to adapt and those sort of things. Injuries, like that's a huge one, being able to adapt and work around injuries. Um, Kind of to wrap up, just a couple questions for like younger coaches to hear from you. Obviously, they've heard your story and things like that, but what do you think's probably been like the biggest thing that you've changed about your coaching philosophy or just the way that you approach things? The biggest thing that you've changed, and then the biggest thing that you've seen change over the course of your coaching career.
Well, from my coaching philosophy, I wouldn't change nothing from the things that I already told you. But the biggest change that I have seen is uh, there are people that are focusing too much as I was doing, and I think it was a mistake focusing too much in exercise science and being a good coach without working on the soft skill. Nowadays, I know coaches that they are American citizens, they born in United States, English is their first language, and they know how to speak. But communicating effectively is not their main ability either. And it's something that coaches need to start developing. It's something that coaches need to start paying attention to because at the end of the day, it's the way that we can connect with both coaches and players that we are going to separate us from other coaches. And it's not just storing information for us, but also expressing the information that we know to others.
How do you think you would like if you had like an intern or a young coach, somebody that, somebody from the DR that wanted to reach out to you to like learn from you and learn from your experiences, what advice would you give them in terms of like how to, you know, go about being better at communicating? Obviously, like learning a language is one thing, but learning those soft skills, learning how to communicate, learning how to develop that relationship with the athletes and getting that buy-in and get that trust. What do you think's like, I mean, is it just purely from getting reps on the floor and coaching? Is there other ways that you feel like you can learn those things? Like, what advice would you give what advice would you have given yourself, if somebody was in your shoes like you were 7 years ago, what advice would you give them?
I would say this that you are doing, exposing himself to podcasts, to recording himself, talking, to jump to conversations, even though they don't know the players or the coaches. Jump, jump and exposure yourself to those type of environment, to those type of uncomfort zone where you don't want to do it because those are the things that you need. It's the same as we say to players. Sometimes players don't like to do a specific movement, but they need to do it to continue improving, to continue get better. So it's the same for us. We need to jump and be out of our comfort zone in order to improve as well. That's what would be my own advice if I would need to start 7 years ago.
What about you now as a coach? What do you think is something that you're most looking forward to kind of working on and getting better at? And like, what are you learning right now? What are you watching, listening, reading about? What books kind of are next in line for you to read? What podcast videos, what kind of stuff are you doing right now to kind of get yourself better, continue to grow?
Uh, right now, I'm following a podcast of Hoverman Laugh. I don't know if you have heard about him, because he's a neuroscientist, and I'm trying to find a way that I can rewrite my neuroplasticity and strengthen my neuro to speak better and to finally make the transition to be more fluent in this language and not be more translating or doing translation in my mind before speaking in English. And I'm learning a ton from him. I also bought some books that he recommend in order to like change your habits, and that's one of the reasons that you already know that I'm not a huge fan of social media, because social media can give you too many distractions. And right now, as I'm in this process in this transition of um, rewrite my brain and speak better, I'm more focusing of the importance of performing in that way. So right now, like neuroscience is a big point in my career, and I think that is gonna also help me with players, because you know that players get stuck when it's come to skill acquisition or skill adaptations, and it's the same thing as learning another language. If we can help them improve the way they think, the way their brain work, they are going to switch or change their skills if needed faster.
Yeah, sorry, I had to move rooms there, doing some work in the room that I was in. No, I think that's awesome. I mean, the neuroplasticity stuff is something that, I probably wouldn't even have heard of that term if it wasn't for also listening to the Human Lab podcast. Um, and it's one of those things for me, like I think the mindset of, you know, like you said, this you're like we were kind of talking about, like this is kind of like that first for you, this is like that the highest level job you've ever reached. The position that I'm at's the highest position that I've ever had as a coach. But like the minute I feel like either one of us becomes complacent, like we should not be a strength coach anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the way I look at it, is like if I feel like I've ever learned everything I ever need to know, or talked to every person I ever need to talk to, or, coached every athlete in the best way, like the minute I feel like I've hit like the end goal like that, then I need to be done, because there is no end goal. Like it should be a constant developing thing. And again, that's why I like doing these podcasts. And that's why it's something where like originally this was for my interns and my GAs, and it still is, but it's also turned into something that's been really, really fun and cool for me to be able to, reconnect with coaches, or reach out to brand new coaches that aren't in my network, and learn and constantly kind of, like you said, expose yourself to new things and new philosophies and new thought process. Um, Let me see if anybody on here, Josh, Noah, Devin, any of you guys got any questions for Randy? Um,
No,
well,
I don't got any.
okay.
Me either. That was a great podcast, though.
Yeah, I think Randy, honestly, I was gonna wrap it up too. I think you've done a great job, man. Um, and I appreciate you being on here, and I'm looking forward to you getting the AAA job. And again, congrats on that. You'll be in what, Indianapolis, correct?
Yes,
Indianapolis.
sir. Thank you, guys.
Uh, yeah, man, that's awesome. And you like I said, you did a great job. I knew you were gonna do a great job, but it's one of those where just me being reminded kind of your story. And again, I don't want to like say that, like talking about struggles of being a strength coach. Like, I don't want to talk about that, because everybody's kind of had their own path. I don't want to say that and like sound like I'm being overly like empathetic or sympathetic for it. My point of hearing your story is it should be motivating. It should be motivating to like young coaches to realize that, like, hey, like you're not just going to get a AAA strength coach job like year one or year two of your coaching career. Like that, just some people might, some people do, it does work out like that for them. But to be honest with you, those aren't the type of people that I feel like, you know, they're gonna be the type of people that probably hit that end goal too early. Like they're gonna peak too early, in my opinion, if that makes sense, right? I'd rather be the person that peaks later than the person that peaks early, because it means that I've had to put the work in and kind of put my head down and learn and develop and grow and kind of maintain that mindset throughout my career. And I know that that's the same mindset that you probably said 5 times in this podcast. I'm not done yet. I'm not happy with where I'm at yet. Like I'm going to keep growing. So it's one of those things where I really appreciate that, and love that mindset. Do you have anything else that you want to kind of follow up? Any advice for any of the young coaches and people that are going to listen to this or anything?
Oh, basically, what you already said, like, I agree with you. This is an industry that we are always learning. We cannot stop learning. This is like a rabbit hole where we are working on improving ourselves and improving players at the same time. It's not just about that we read something and we are going to apply that thing for our whole life. things are changing. There are a lot of articles out there that are getting out, and we need to be able to, as I said, do the same thing that players need to do to get to the big league. Being able to adapt to the new things and write new concepts and in our minds and continue working toward our goals without feeling that we already reached that end point, because that end point doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's wrap it up on that. That was awesome. Like I said, I knew you were gonna do a great job, and I think it was beyond what I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was really good and great to hear from you, and excited for you taking this journey with the AAA team. When you guys head to, are you still in the DR right now, or when do you head back to the States?
I'm coming back to the state. I'm going back to the state on January the 8th for our
January.
pitching camps. And then we are going to start spring training for like a month and a half. And then going to start the season at the end of March.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you're never going to have to face any cold weather. Like Indianapolis is going to be nice by the time you get there, and you're in the DR now, and Florida in January. So, what's the coldest you've ever been in like in the States? Coldest weather you've ever been in?
I've been in different places in the state. You know, I have visited Canada. I have visited
Okay.
New York. I have
Yeah, New York, that's
visited
true.
Buffalo as well. Those type of cities, and I've been like in -11 one time when
Oh,
I
wow.
was in New York when I was a kid, like 15, 16 year old. Then in Canada in 2021 that I visited Canada, it was minus 14 at some point.
Oof.
And so I've been exposed
So you've been
to
there.
like
You've
low
you
weathers.
you've been exposed to it enough to know that it sucks, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Especially coming from the air, the whole year we have the same type of weather here, so
yeah.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah. So, all right, Randy. Well, it's good chatting with you. I'll get this kind of put on YouTube here eventually, and then we can share it out there because I think definitely people are going to be able to take a lot away from it, and hopefully we get a lot of people interested in watching it. All right.
Thank you guys. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for taking your time to listen to my story and my journey. Take
Yeah.
care.
Absolutely, brother. Take care.